welcome to the viewers to this test talk, where the topic is the discussion of the challenges and the importance of explicability, trustworthy, bias, and ethical testing of AI systems. We're joined today by one of the prime researchers in this area, Eduard Paul Enoiu. Eduard Paul Enoiu is senior lecturer and researcher at Mälardalen University in Västerås, Sweden. Mälardalen University is one of Sweden's largest institutes of higher education and is characterized by close partnerships with industry and its applied research, especially in safety-critical embedded systems. A native of Bucharest, Eduard earned an engineer's degree from Polytech University of Bucharest in 2009 and a PhD from Mälardalen University in 2016. His research interests span software engineering and empirical research, especially involving and assuring industrial software. He is currently doing research on a diverse array of topics, including the ethical and human aspects of AI, automation and software engineering and testing. His research is supported by major funding agencies in Sweden and Europe. As the first question in terms of getting started on this test talk is, what got you involved in this area of research?
Happy to be here, Peter. So, I think that's a long story short. I think I joined the software testing laboratory, which is a research lab at Mälardalen University in 2011. And this was originally founded by professors Paul Pettersson and Daniel Sundmark and a few other folks here. And generally, they were working on current and future challenges in testing of software. I thought there were a number of really talented researchers here, and it was a good environment in which to think about software testing in the context of safety critical systems, and also automation and AI research that's already been being done in this university. So I'm nowadays I got here in 2011, and nowadays I'm looking on the use of automation and AI for testing safety critical systems, as well as how to verify autonomous systems.
Your topic is explicability, trustworthy, bias, and ethics. And those terms sound more like one when used in philosophy and not in software systems testing. How does one move from the esoteric to the precision of definition needed for testing of AI software systems? Is this a difficult problem?
Oh yeah, it is difficult. I think we as engineers first need to understand philosophy and ethics. And I think the fields of ethics concern, the study of what constitutes an ideal conduct in various situations while taking, some decisions that could affect the people or environment. And the main goal here is to actually try to get this to examine the aspects of conduct and to determine actions that are deemed morally acceptable. So the question of what is morally acceptable needs this continuous evaluation. And I think the study of the ethical aspects of, major changes introduced in society like AI needs to happen, of course, with a sufficient precision, especially because we are engineers and we need to make it more precise. But we need to understand ethics from a philosophical perspective first. We need to understand that morality is, a system through which we determine the right and wrong conduct. And, morality is just the first order set of beliefs and practices of good life. And ethics is the second order. It is this reflection on the adequacy of our moral beliefs. So this is exactly what we do in testing. We reflect on the adequacy of our tests. In this case, we're testing if a system is ethical or not. And as you know, AI is capable of dealing with, problems that are by nature probabilistic. They're underspecified. They use incomplete information. So the growing use of this AI in both systems we use, like cars and phones, as well as by engineers developing such systems, they pose really big challenges. And since it raises these trustworthy and ethical concerns, we need to actually have a more engineering approach on how to measure non-discrimination, fairness, transparency, governance, accountability, especially the most widespread ethical principle in AI, which is explicability and transparency.
Well, the topics of explicability and trustworthy are clearly difficult, and your point's well taken. But what does it mean to state that a system is trustworthy, and why is that important?
You do not test for explicability. Explicability is needed to actually test and understand the system under test. And how one does testing for trustworthiness is quite important. So I think trustworthiness, what we usually mean by that is how much trust can we have in a system that we don't actually understand. And I think in many cases as a user, you need to put that into context. And I think trustworthiness has relationship to many different aspects like responsibility. And I think this is very important when you're actually trying to assess AI that runs on, safety critical systems. So I think it's better to actually focus on a related term, not trustworthiness, because that's a bit vague. But I think it's better to focus on responsible AI. And that's what Virginia Dignam talks about, I think, quite a lot. And she's a researcher doing research on ethics and AI. And this is because responsible AI is something that is more meaningful for us engineers. So it is not an option to ignore our responsibility. And I think AI systems are artifacts that decide upon, you design, they're designed and implemented and used by people. So we people are responsible. And we are responsible to try again until we fail, we observe, we denounce when we see things going wrong, and then we build better systems. So I think it's more important to have a responsible an AI than a trustworthy AI.
Well, that's a great answer for the differentiation between responsible AI and trustworthy AI. However, the area of ethics vary between one group of spiritual persuasion and different societies around the world. How do you determine, or how does one determine what ethical standards are required for software systems, and why are the ethical aspects of AI so important?
Cultural differences, pose a serious challenge to the ethics and governance of artificial intelligence. So you have this cultural difference that may enable, actors to disregard the demand of important ethical values, or even in a way to justify the violation of them through, difference to the local culture. You can either affirm the local culture that, lacks specific ethical values like privacy, or by asserting the local culture, upholding, conflicting values, like you have state intervention is good. But I think it's important to have this cross-cultural cooperation that will be essential for the success of these, ethics initiatives. And what I mean is by having this cross-cultural cooperation, we mean groups from different cultures and nations working together on ensuring that AI is developed, deployed, and governed in some way that society will benefit from. But maybe I can actually come back to the last part of your question, because you said, why is it important to talk about, I think, also ethics of AI and take that into account in testing? So it's actually quite common to talk about safety aspects of AI. So you see that even in the press, because it's especially problematic if we consider relying on AI in critical systems, such as found in trains, cars, and airplanes. And in this kind of applications, I think you have the software failures that can lead to economic damage, and in some cases, loss of human lives, and that's quite bad. And many talk about dilemmas here to show how important ethics in AI and testing of AI is. I think this is a rather false problem, especially for us engineers. So if you name decision situation and dilemmas as underlying the impossibility of finding an ideal, perfect, unique, and provable solution, then you're actually not focusing on the right problem. So you have press coverage focusing on, risk, security, and prediction of impact on the job market. And the result is a discussion of essentially technical problems that focus on how to achieve a desired outcome. And it is not only about actually avoiding unethical actions or harmful consequences, but even more about developing and using AI to bring about, good consequences. So there are people, including me, who think that ethical analysis should focus on the study of ethics of complex real-world engineering problems, because the software plays this crucial role in, like, for example, self-driving cars. And then you need software engineering solutions that should handle actual ethical and social considerations. So the main goal in this situation would be, to examine the moral aspects of conduct. You need to determine the actions that are morally acceptable.
So I think that you address the issue and importance of ethics extremely well. But you also include in this sort of framework bias. So what is bias in software systems? And what is the role of a human in the loop to train AI systems against bias and establish the ethical boundaries that bias might provoke?
The idea of complementing AI with, human in the loop intelligence is not new. And the idea is to, help increase, interactive exploitation of AI. You have the human backing control, and you have a supervision on how to steer the power of AI, let's say, in a trustworthy way. I mean, this is easier said than done, but you have the role of the human, and you have some mechanism of interactive AI that have to rely on, simple yet powerful, maybe visualization or explanations. But getting back to how to define bias and what is bias in software systems, well, when testing AIs, we need to look at all the sources of bias, including, for example, skewed data in some of the cases that we are interested in doing research. And bias within the data acquisition process is quite an important aspect. So the most important part of that is the trainer. So how was the AI trained? And then you have quite a lot of popular methods of automated training methods for AI, which I guess Uber used for their autopilot, for example. And this is, we might want to consider AI models trained by humans instead, data scientists, versus those trained by automated AI. So I think in this way we can try to cater for some of these biases. And actually, in a recent study, I think from IBM, I think that the article is named "In AI We Trust." So they looked to understand how different factors about decision-making process an AI is doing, and how an AI model can support that process, and how this influences people's perception of trustworthiness. So the results actually favored human-trained AI when AI was solely responsible for making a decision. But this is still an open question. How can we actually improve an AI model by having a human in the loop when training before it goes into use, and to try to reduce the amount of cognitive biases that we actually put into this when, for example, we train the AI.
So, Edward, given that we are going to have to expect surprises from AI systems, ultimately, who's responsible for the behavior of an AI system? And in your answer, can you address 4 areas? Who's responsible for the diversity in the AI system, or unfair bias, or unethical decisions? And ultimately, who trains the trainer?
Well, that's a great question. I need to start, I think, in a way by talking about responsible AI, because this is a very good discussion. But in our context, I think we need to have a meaningful definition for us engineers, and I think it is not an option to ignore our responsibility as humans. AI systems are artifacts that we decide upon, we design together, implemented, and they're used by people. So we people are responsible. We are responsible to try again and again until we fail. And we need to observe what things go wrong, and they will go wrong. And we are responsible to be informed and to inform, to rebuild and improve. So responsible AI is more than, ticking of some ethical boxes or the development of some add-on feature in AI system. We need to think about ethics in design. And this is about, engineering processes that support the design and evaluation of an AI system. And here the aim is to actually ensure that the AI system development teams are, mindful of the potential consequences for individual and societies. So you need to anticipate the consequences of the design choices. You need to reflect upon the problems being solved by engaging all stakeholders. You're trying to verify, validate the design, and you take appropriate action. You need to ensure social, legal, and ethical acceptability of the system. So that means that we need to, in a way, realize that the principles of transparency, as we said before, responsibility, accountability are at the core of the design of AI systems. But then we need to also focus on not ethics in design, but ethics by design. So this is about the ethics of the behavior of AI system. And there is a lot of work in this field that is concerned with the representation and use of moral values by AI system, or understanding meaning and the specification of, suitable constraints on the system behavior. Or you're trying to integrate some ethical reasoning as part of the algorithms that determine the behavior of this, artificial autonomous systems. And in the end, you need to have responsible AI by introducing ethics for designers. And this refers to codes of conduct. So you have regulatory requirements and standards and certification processes in order to ensure the integrity of all actors as they, design, construct, employ, manage these artificially intelligent systems. This is needed because you need to ensure that they consider societal impact of their design choices and take the necessary steps to minimize negative impact and use of their result. The problem is that nowadays you see in many cases that you have engineers, but also CEOs that they would like to that someone else takes the responsibility for their own decisions. And that's not something that we want to see in our future. But yeah, there are many actually regulations that they already exist today on AI responsibility and trustworthiness. So one example is the European Union initiative, but there are other companies that work in this area of responsibility.
Well, a difficult area for sure, and something that's evolving constantly. Can you talk to a subject that we know well, which is legacy systems? Now, we know that's a huge technology debt in industry around the world of old legacy systems. What are the risks as we build up and evolve legacy AI systems in corporations and industry as the AI technology improves with various releases of different types of AI systems that ultimately become legacy AI systems?
Yes, we are faced with the challenge of having AI systems that become obsolete after some time, since technology in AI improves dramatically. So the risk is that we are stuck with software made during the infancy of AI ethics. And this will remain in many of our important areas of life. So we would need to tune these software components that contain AI. And I remember actually seeing in couple of papers, research papers, methods that enable dealing with errors without the need to retrain the AI system. So that means that we can actually take these legacy AI systems and without retraining them, trying to, making them useful.
So, Eduard, it's been a great discussion, and it's clear that research and movement forward in testing of explicability, trustworthy, bias, and ethical testing of AI systems is a critically important field of research, setting a foundation for the future of how society is going to manage cognitive AI systems. What do you see as the future, and what needs to happen to progress it?
It's a good question, and I think I have my personal view on this, but also based on my years of experience. And I think we need to ground this research, future research, in ethical AI, explicability, trustworthiness, bias, in our engineering practice and human cognition. We need to move from ethical dilemmas to real engineering problems related to ethical AI. So, for example, you have this increasing autonomy of AI systems, and you have this deployment in real-world scenarios already. And you encounter these dilemmas every now and then that demand some level of ethical reasoning. So you have a lot of attention that has been given, I think, to ethical dilemmas in self-driving cars. So a self-driving car may face a decision between different actions, both with harmful consequences for people. So this has been described as the well-known trolley problem. So this is a hypothetical scenario, long used in philosophy and ethics. And this supposes that you have a runway trolley speeding down a track to which 5 people are tied and enabled to move. And then you have an observer that controls a lever that can switch to an alternative track. So the moral dilemma for the observer is, should I, do nothing and allow the trolley to kill the 5, or pull the lever and kill 1? And this has been applied to, self-driving cars also usually involve, you have the decision between harming passengers or pedestrians. And you have many different variants, whom to kill, And this, for example, it's a perfect example of wasting research on this kind of dilemmas, because you have this utilitarian view that you're trying to aim to minimize casualties, even if it means to kill the passenger in the car. By following the principle, you have a moral action that maximizes utility, minimize the damage. And I think this is an interesting problem, but I think it's interesting for philosophers, not for engineers, because this problem is unsolvable by construction. The problem is that for the question whom to kill, all answers are bad or wrong. There is no correct answer to this problem, and therefore it is not the right kind of problem, because is not representative for the real life situation. And I think this is something that we need to maintain more. We need to look at engineering problems than philosophical problems.
Where does the listener go to get more information or to get involved in the type of research that you've just been articulating?
I think you can follow me on Twitter at Eduard Enoiu, or you can listen to my podcast, Testing Habits. Of course, you can visit my university page. If you're a student or a researcher that wants to work in this area, you can just send me an email or just, get in contact with other people that do research in this area. I think nowadays we have many journals and conferences and companies that are working on this. For example, we have this IEEE International Conference on Artificial Intelligence Testing, where we discuss these issues and how to test AI and gain more explainable AI by testing. So I would like to see more software testing practitioners be more involved in research on these aspects and be involved with the actual researchers that are contributing to this area nowadays.
So, Edward, wonderful explanation, and thank you very much. And really appreciate your joining us today for this test talk and for an excellent discussion. So thank you again. And for the viewers, it brings us to the end of this test talk, and please join us for the next one when we release it.
Thanks for having me.